Hey, welcome to 209coach.com. I want to do a video for you today with Bri Ellis on how her technique will definitely improve your power. Her technique will improve much of your swing in every capacity. And I'm going to kind of go over what she's kind of doing, that particular technique that she uses, that it's very common in elite players, but she does this so beautifully. And I want to kind of go piece by piece on what she's doing. And hopefully this video right here will help you if you follow it. And again, one thing I always talk about when you're working on your swing, all you need from the very beginning really is all you need is yourself, a bat and a mirror, okay? So I suggest or I recommend for you to do this just in front of a mirror so you can hit like Bri Ellis, or at least start the process of starting to get her technique down, okay? So if we get down to what's going on here with her swing, now pay attention right off the bat. You can see here that she's very comfortable with her setup. Her hands are between her neck and her deltoid. Now this is not direct off the side batter's box view, but you can see it's very obvious that her hands are between her neck and her deltoid, and you can see that the bat is basically just bouncing on her shoulder. In other words, if she was to lift it up, it would be vertical, okay? So I don't mind if the bat is down. I just don't like it facing towards the umpire or facing towards the field when you're at your setup, okay? Now, when you do this, what this does, it creates a lot of flexion in your arms, okay? And this is what you want, because at the setup with Bri Ellis, you can see that she's just so comfortable. And one way to determine whether this is occurring or not is that you're going to have a lot of flexion in your arms, okay? So if we look at this video right here, you can see that there's a lot of flexion in her arms. In other words, you can see that her arms are between her neck and her deltoid. There's a lot of flexion in the arms. The bat is vertical. Therefore, you're going to have a very relaxed setup. And this is what you want. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough. You want the bat to be pretty much at a vertical state. You don't want it leaning this way, and you don't want it leaning this way. That starts to create a compromise in how you're going to use your wrists and everything else in your body later in the swing, okay? Now, as we go further here, you get yourself in this real comfortable setup and everything looks really good right here. Now, the next thing that's going to occur here with her swing is this. Once a player starts to get into the swing, watch what happens here as she lifts her front leg. Immediately, she shifts 100% of her weight into her back leg. Now, for me personally, I like players to kind of start here because you kind of eliminate a particular or a one particular stage of the swing, which would be moving back. Okay, so in other words, if you start here, you're already where you should be. Now, being where she is perfectly fine, but again, I have found working with players when they start back kind of like this, it just simplifies their swing and makes it easier for you to track the ball, okay? Now, again, as she lifts her front leg, watch what's going on here. Let's just pay attention to her lower body. If you pay attention to her belt buckle, it's pointing direct off the side batter's box view. As she starts to lift her leg, you can see right here, it's very obvious now that her belt buckle now is starting to face more in this manner, okay? And the reason why is because the back pocket is starting to rotate towards the pitcher. So right now her body's kind of like this, because her body right now is rotating more where the back pocket is rotating towards the pitcher. This is what I highly recommend for you to do. Do what she's doing right here. You can see here how she starts. You can see how there's a little shift here of her hips where she's rotating. You can see that little bit of rotation here. This is crucial for you to get that back leg, the back hip in a very good torque, in a very nice resistance where you feel like your back leg and your back hip is fully loaded, okay? Now again, simultaneously, as she's lifting her front leg, watch what's going on right here as she gets into the apex of the gather, and this is real important. Notice how quiet her arms and her bat and everything are. In other words, there's really no difference from the setup going into the gather with her upper body, okay? It's basically just shifting everything over with no pullback yet, okay? So you can see here right now, she's at the apex of the gather. Again, her back pocket is starting to rotate towards the pitcher very early in the swing. you can see here that she still has a lot of flexion in her arms, okay? This is real important. And again, her bat is still at a vertical stage. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. It is crucial, okay? It is crucial that when you start to get into your gather, that you do not start any pullback yet. Again, watch what's going on. I'm just going to just kind of play this for you so you can kind of mimic this in front of a mirror. You start to lift your front leg, start feeling like your back pocket is starting to rotate towards the pitcher, feel like your belt buckle is facing more towards the catcher, and you want to feel like 100% of your weight back, it's in your back leg, okay? So in other words, while you're right here, you can literally put your front leg down and they'll kind of lift it up and you can balance on your back leg, okay? That's a really good drill for you to know whether you are on your back leg. Now, from the apex of the gather, watch what's going on here with Bri Ellis' swing. Notice how she starts her forward move. Pay attention to her back elbow. Notice how now it goes back and behind her, not until she starts her forward move. Apex of the gather, now she starts her forward move. The back elbow works back and behind her. Okay, now this is really important right here because at this stage of the swing right here, you can see now that she has the shoulder to elbow look, okay? In other words, what you want at this stage of the swing is close as possible from your front shoulder to your back shoulder to the top of your back elbow should all be in a straight line, okay? Now this right here, you will not know if you're doing it correctly unless you're doing it in front of a mirror. This is why I always tell my students when you're doing your drills, do it in front of a mirror. Now pay attention right here. She's at the apex of the gather. Watch what's going on right here. Her palm would be facing in the direction of the pitcher. Okay, this is where her palm is at the apex of the gather. Now watch what happens here as she starts to get into her toe touch. And as she gets into her toe touch, she's not lunging. Watch how she kind of just hovers her front leg out there, okay? In other words, there's no lunge. It's basically staying on her back leg while she basically just sticks her front leg out there, okay? This keeps your weight back. It allows you not to lunge. It allows you to have a very simple swing. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. It's not until her forward move. Pay attention to her back elbow. Notice how her back elbow is working back and behind her as she starts to get into her toe touch, okay? Now, again, just like I mentioned, when she first got into her apex of the gather, it was obvious that her palm was facing towards the pitcher. Now you can see that her palm is facing pretty much in front of home plate, okay? So again, this is crucial. Pay attention to what's going on right here. Just pay attention to her top hand. Notice how her top hand right now is facing towards the pitcher. And if I slow this down, you can see it's very obvious that as she starts her forward move, there's definitely a process that's taking place here where her palm is now facing downwards. Now, her bat started again pretty much behind her like this. Now you can see that her bat is facing more going towards the field. Now this technique, this move that she does creates a lot of power. The reason being is because she's coiling the lower body and she's coiling the upper body as she gets into her toe touch. Now again, it is crucial that you do this in front of a mirror because again, if you do not do this in front of a mirror, you're not going to know if your angles are correct. Now, again, the drill would be, it's a very simple drill. You just want to get into a setup very comfortably. You want to do this with super smooth tempo. All right, you want to be very relaxed. As you lift your front leg, you want to feel like your back pocket's already coiling towards the pitcher. You want to feel like 100% of your weight is in your back leg as you get into the apex of the gather. At the apex of the gather, your bat should still be vertical, just like you see here with Bri Ellis. And again, you can see here that her elbow's down at the apex of the gather. It's not until she starts her forward move. And watch again, she's not lunging. She's basically just hovering her front leg forward. This keeps the swing at a very, very nice, simple move right here. There's nothing complex about it, okay? And again, when she starts her forward move, the back elbow works back and behind her. And good way to do this, to get the back elbow to work back and behind you as you're doing this in the mirror, feel like your top hand is pulling behind your ear. And you want to keep your hands pretty much at the level of your armpit like you see here with Bri, okay? You do not want your hands too high. I don't mind them being a little low, but I don't like them being too high because then you're going to be chopping down at the ball. Now again, you can see how the back elbow is working back and behind her as she's hovering her front leg forward. And again, the pull back, it's a top hand pulling back and you want to maintain it well into the hip thrust, okay? And I can get into the hip thrust in some other video, but if you watch my videos, I talk about hip thrusts, and that's a very crucial part of the swing, which also Bri does very beautifully. Again, give me a like if you learned something. The main thing I want you to get out of this video, again, is just keep it very simple. Get into a simple gather, get into a simple simple toe touch with great pullback, and you will start the process of having the technique that Bri Ellis uses so beautifully in her swing. Thank you so much for watching.